Thanks, Chris. Joining us to weigh in this week, Grammy Award-winning writer and activist Che Rhymefest-Smith, Madeline Dubeck, Chief Operating Officer for Reboot Illinois, and Kyle Hillman, Director of Legislative Affairs for the Illinois chapter of the National Association of Social Workers. Hello and welcome to you all.
Hello, how are you doing?
We'll start with this week's biggest state news. Newly minted governor, Republican Bruce Rauner, delivered his first State of the State address this week, and he laid out an ambitious agenda both in policy and unity. Let's take a quick listen.
The time is now for all of us, Republicans and Democrats, to do big things, the right things, for the people of our great state. Now's the time for bold and decisive action. It is make or break time for the land of Lincoln. We can reclaim our proud history as a strong and vibrant state and fulfill our destiny as a beacon of the Midwest.
Very bold agenda there. The governor wants to spend more money on education and prison guards. He wants to freeze property taxes for 2 years, expand the sales tax. How much of this will the Democrats who control the House and Senate go along with, Kyle?
Well, I mean, a lot of this stuff he can't go in. It's a lot of continuing the campaign rhetoric. The taxes for property will never get through. I think some of the anti-union right-to-work stuff will never get through. He can do some stuff with whether through his divisions, through his appointments, outsourcing, reduction in how they spend the money that's being allocated. But a lot of the legislative stuff that he threw out there, which was a laundry list of Alex stuff, will not get passed. I can't imagine that they just roll over and allow that to happen.
Well, his biggest hurdle, the Democrats in both the House and the Senate, Democratic House Speaker Mike Madigan called this a good start, and he also had some kind words. He said he will be cooperative and professional in his response to this. Madeline, is this a kumbaya moment, and if so, how long will it last?
I think it lasted about the length of the speech and maybe a few minutes after that. Unions are up in arms and very much alarmed and agitated. The governor gave some preview speeches in the weeks leading up to this speech, and within days at his second preview speech, there were union protests outside of it. So I think we're in for not quite the extent of what happened in Wisconsin with Governor Scott Walker, who tried to take away collective bargaining rights altogether, but we're probably in for a similar clash.
Yeah, the governor did seem to take a big swing at organized labor, talking about letting state workers decide whether or not to join the unions. Che, is this kind of these harsh words for unions, is this a good place to start off for the governor?
I don't believe it's a good place at all to start off. I also believe that the governor is trying to divide the African American community and the unions with this thing of, well, we need more parity, we need more apprenticeships within the unions, and people need a right to choose whether or not they even want to be a part of this or not. Well, what this does is there are many African Americans in the community that have always said, yes, the unions need to be more fair with the representation of those unions. And so the governor is now exploiting that divide in order to destabilize the union. So yes, you can have parity within the union, but in a few years you won't have a union at all. So, I think that what, at least in the African American community, we would like to see is a more genuine approach to parity from this governor.
What would the genuine approach be? Because he does make a point that you would agree with, I presume, that there should be more minorities in the unions and in these apprenticeship programs.
I would agree, but I would also say that when the governor says, however, we don't want unions to donate to political campaigns, right. When the governor says, we want unions we want people to be able to choose whether they are in or out of a union. What this does is it limits the influence of the union. So even if you have that parity, you may not have a strong union to represent you.
Yeah, he's clearly trying to dilute the power of the unions, and we'll see how that works out.
I think, too, it's also kind of interesting in the sense that he has to negotiate, particularly with AFSCME, right off the bat. I mean, all the union contracts are coming up, and to throw this right across the shot off the bow, which has very little chance of getting through a Democratic majority, he really is agitating the negotiations before the negotiations even start. It's kind of a weird strategy in my mind to start that conversation from we want you gone, rather than how do we work in a conciliatory manner.
Well, it's not quite "we want you gone," but you know, that people that the government should operate more like the private sector, and you know, if people perform at a high level, they should get bonuses. They should be paid on merit, not on longevity. You know, I think those are some ideas that clearly resonated with a lot of voters because he was elected.
Well, I think this is the problem in that is that if we say people should be paid on merit, the new staff that the governor hired that gets a higher wage without even doing the job yet, or $100,000 for a chief of staff for his wife, while state workers, he's talking about lowering their wages before he even assesses the job they're doing. I don't believe that that's genuine.
Yeah, and does he risk poisoning the well without having legislative support behind him?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there was definitely some tension and irritation expressed by the Senate Democratic president, John Cullerton, who said, you know, he's talking about unity, and then he comes out with all of this divisive talk at the same time. And so I think that it's going to be an interesting few months.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking right to work state. He's advocating to take out the money from the union influence, which is unilateral, in my opinion, unilateral disarmament from an individual who can self-fund his own campaigns. I mean, the steps that he's doing is to really drastically reduce the influence the unions have and the ability of them to work for the middle class. And it's kind of a surprising, shot across the bow right before he has to do negotiations. He's going to have to sit across from those guys and get a fair deal for the state of Illinois. And I don't know how you start with. Here, let me go after you.
We'll touch on one thing the governor didn't talk about in his State of the State. Not one word about the looming $100 billion pension crisis. Madeline, was it a mistake not to talk about this?
A lot of ideas and still not very much in the way of detail. And really, beyond mentioning he wanted to broaden the sales tax, which he said in July during the campaign, no real discussion of taxes or very much specifically about how he's going to address not just the, by some accounts, $111 billion pension crisis, but also $6 billion in unpaid bills. And a U of I report recently projected that by the beginning of the next fiscal year in July, we'll really be $9 billion behind. So he's got 2 weeks to come up with some details on that when he gives his budget speech.
That's February 18th. We'll stay tuned for that. Now we'll move to politics in another realm, the politics of weather. In this city, everything is political, including the blizzard, the snow, when your street gets plowed. We saw the fifth biggest snowstorm this week. We also had about 1.5 feet of snow. The mayor said this historic snowstorm got an historic response, but at least two of his opponents disagree. Che, how did he do? Any political fallout here?
Well, I believe there is. I live in the Chatham community. We had virtually no trucks come through. I mean, neighbors were digging neighbors out. Neighbors were digging strangers out. The side streets were something that, you know, in the South Side, I believe that it's horrible on the South Sides and the West Sides when it's normalized to not go down a side street because you know there's not going to be any snow removal, while other communities are outraged if there is no snow removal. I think this just tells the tale of two Chicagos once again.
Well, there was a piece in the paper about Alderman Ed Burke's street being paved or plowed 5 times while many other people were digging out, and people in your neighborhood didn't even get their mail delivered because
yeah, it was a couple of checks streets. I didn't get that. I'm going to have to squat in my house very soon.
But there are some, it's not just, are you saying that this is a racial thing, that
I believe
predominantly
that,
minority neighborhoods are not getting plowed? But
well, I think it's something that goes into this mayoral race, is that there is not parity when it comes to communities in Chicago in terms of service. So if we want to call it, if some people want to say it's racist, I can't say it's not if it's predominantly in black and brown communities where the snow is not being removed. If people want to say that it's a lack of attention paid to communities, I can't say it's not. If I'm seeing 3, 4, 5 blocks of neighbors helping each other while the trucks are on the other side of town.
yeah, I mean, anecdotally, I heard about people in more predominantly white communities who had the same trouble digging out of streets and alleys and so forth. And it's hard to know, you know, if they've made progress in the last few days. I don't think this will have a lasting effect. But if we get more snow
And even if
right
it's
before
not,
the election. You know,
even if you say, and you know, I'm not quick to say that it is right, because even if you say there are people in white communities that are digging themselves out, maybe it's a power thing. I mean, if Ed Burke's neighborhood
if you live by an alderman, your street gets plowed.
If Rahm Emanuel's street is plowed, then why isn't yours or mine?
Absolutely, that's
jump
the
in, Kyle.
question.
Yeah, this is kind of the quintessential Chicago
I'm sure
story,
Chuy
right?
Garcia's street didn't get plowed.
Probably not. But you know, this really is the quintessential Chicago story, right? If you don't plow your snow, then the mayor loses his job. Something that's different from '79 when Blandick lost his position was the CTA was a mess, and Rahm's not having that. I mean, the CTA is having its normal problems, but it's not necessarily having the drastic problems that the CTA had back in '79. I mean, people were standing in line for hours trying to get on the train. They were using plywood for snow plows. The ancillary things aren't happening, and I think when people aren't having those experiences, I don't think it has the longevity issue of losing votes. Now, what's interesting to me is that from a media standpoint, we've kind of created this mythos, though, that if you don't clear my streets, the mayor's going to be gone. And so it'll be interesting to see if by creating that myth, if it actually is reality now. You know, because you hear people say, my street's bad, so I'm not voting for the mayor. And I wonder if that actually pulls out.
It doesn't
I agree
translate,
with
like
you
a
that
self-fulfilling prophecy.
I think in some ways it might have been created, which is great.
But the politics of the snow politics probably wouldn't matter if it didn't compound with red light cameras, 50 schools shut down. I mean, we're talking about the politics of communities. One of the things that's said about this mayor is that he doesn't pay attention to communities. He says, I want Chicago to be a world-class city, but he ignores the neighborhoods. So I think that as we enter this election on the 24th, that this argument goes into the neighborhood category.
Sure.
We're talking about politics. We're talking about weather being part of politics. Now we'll shift to health being part of politics. The measles outbreak, at least 145 cases in 14 states, one in the northwest suburbs here in Illinois. Are you surprised that measles has become a political issue, Kyle?
You know, yes, because at this point we should be beyond measles, right? You know, it's interesting because, and this isn't just a conservative or a liberal issue. I mean, there's on both sides not vaccinating their children. The interesting conversation to me is the choice, right? That some people have latched on to the idea that this is a parental choice. You know, if a child, a 3-year-old, had a high fever, has problem breathing, maybe even convulsing, and the parent didn't take them into the hospital, we would not be saying that's a choice that the parent didn't choose. Except those are some of the symptoms of measles, and yet we're allowing individuals not to vaccinate. I think the choice piece surprises me even more than this, is the idea that we're going to somehow, from a political standpoint, frame this as one side or the other.
Yeah, and how do you balance individual freedom and the public good here, Che?
Well, you know, if we have to have car insurance in order not only to protect ourselves, but to protect others from us, why wouldn't we do that with biological diseases? You know what I mean? So I think that it's completely asinine to say, I mean, and the people who are making the claims that these vaccinations are bad are saying crazy things like, you know, there are baby embryos inside the vaccines, and people are just taking arguments without any scientific proof and running with them because they don't want to vaccinate their own child. I don't believe one has the right to infringe upon the health of my children.
California is looking at a law that would ban personal exemptions of people who just want to opt out for religious or personal reasons. Madeline, should Illinois look at doing the same?
I think there's starting to be some discussion of that, and I think it'll be an interesting phenomenon if this causes that to happen. And I think that there could be some growing momentum, and this backlash is kind of the beginning of that wave. So it'll be interesting to see. You know, it's just crazy to me. I agree with Che that we have science and we have facts, and we're letting this get in the way of protecting all of us. That's how, you know, diseases spread and epidemics happen, and we've had more than 100 cases of measles reported in Illinois already this year. So something's got to be done about this. And the fact that politicians get caught up in it still in this day and age just blows my mind.
You know, we don't let children bring in nuts or peanut butter into the schools because it affects other children. But at the same time, we're saying this is a choice, right? Well, it depends on what school we go to. But but the reality is we make this decision now with vaccines that's a personal choice. But we won't let we protect those other people. And I think that's the key that people need to understand, is that it's not just the kid that you're choosing, your kid, to not to vaccinate. You're actually affecting the children that physically cannot, because of their immune system, take the vaccine. And so you're putting those children at risk, not just your own.
We'll shift gears to our last topic here. Congressman Aaron Schock and his newly decorated office has some people seeing red, literally. A watchdogs group for ethics investigation is calling for an ethics investigation of the congressman after a reporter from the Washington Post visited his office. Newly redecorated in red, an office worker said it was reminiscent of Downton Abbey. But the congressman has since said he's never even seen the show. A decorator he knows said she did this for free. This is a gift that it would exceed House ethics rules. Kyle, is this bad taste, bad judgment, a little of both? What is this?
You know,
Bad PR.
I'm going to let the congressman speak for himself when he quoted a teen superstar and saying the hater's going to hate. I mean, this really isn't an issue.
Haters gonna hate.
But it's Aaron Schock, so it is, right? I mean, the guy, he has a reality show I would watch. You know, if this would be, you know, Keeping Up with Aaron Schock. I think that would be on my DVR.
He's got a great Instagram feed.
He's got an amazing Instagram feed. You know, he's all over the place. He's on TMZ more than most of the celebrities. You know, it's not a big deal, but it's Aaron Schock, so. Well.
But it just sends a horrible, horrible message, you know, when Governor Rauner is talking this week about how we're all struggling and it's do or die time, and here's this congressman who, you know, likes to show his six-pack abs on the cover of Men's Health magazine and, you know, has this incredible Instagram feed, and now he's got this office and we don't know, you know, there are questions raised about how it was paid for. It just really does not send a good message to the people who elected him.
All right, we'll have to leave it at that. We're out of time. We'd like to thank our guests, Madeline Dubeck, Che Rhymefest Smith, and Kyle Hillman.